Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Spruce Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 12 NFL predictions. So last week in Week 11, I had a pretty good week going 11-4, and that brings my record on the season to 108-55. But kicking things off this week on Thursday Night Football, we have the Bills at the Texans. So the Bills, they're 7-3, and coming off a nice win over the Buccaneers, and they face the Texans team that's 5-5. But the Texans, they have been a lot better recently, as they've won 3 of their last 4 games. And their last 2 wins have also come without CJ Stroud, and they're without CJ Stroud once again, as he's still dealing with a concussion. So Davis Mills will be making his 3rd straight start, and he hasn't been elite for the Texans, but he also hasn't been terrible. But Davis Mills and the Texans offense, they face the Bills defense is okay. They're allowing 22.9 points per game, but they have not been very good recently, allowing over 30 points in back-to-back games. And the Bills defense also really bad against the run, but luckily for the Bills, the Texans don't really run the football too effectively. Now, on the flip side, the Bills' offense is great. They're 4th best in the NFL, putting up 29.2 points per game, and they also have the league's top rushing offense. But the Bills, they gave really tough matchup this week because the Texans' defense is one of the best in the NFL. And they've actually got the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL, and they're 3rd best against the run, as they're giving up just 16.3 points per game and 87.1 rushing yards per game. But this game I definitely think is going to be very close, and I definitely think the Texans have a chance if this game stays low scoring, and I definitely think their defense is good enough to keep it a low scoring game. But I'm still going to take the Bills to get the win. I definitely think the Texans have a chance to get the win, especially because they're at home. But I think the Bills are the better overall team. I trust Josh Allen a lot more than I trust Davis Mills, and I've got the Bills with the win by a score of 21-16. Moving to the games on Sunday, starting off with the Steelers at the Bears. This feels like a very weird game, because both these teams have pretty good records, but I don't really think either team is an elite team. But the Bears, they're 7-3, and they've won 3 games in a row, and the Steelers, they're 6-4, and they're coming off a pretty solid win against the Bengals. But this is a pretty interesting game. The offense for the Steelers is pretty solid, putting up 24.6 points per game, but they might be without Aaron Rodgers, who's dealing with a wrist injury, but he doesn't need surgery and he could play this week. But if Rodgers can't go, then Mason Rudolph will get the start for the Steelers, and he's definitely a major step down from Aaron Rodgers. But whoever does end up starting for the Steelers, they face the Bears defense that's not the greatest, as they're giving up over 26 points per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for the Bears has been pretty good. They're scoring 25.8 points per game. They've been great running the football, as their 146 rushing yards per game ranks 2nd best in the NFL. But the Bears offense, they face a Steelers defense that is decent but nothing amazing, as they're allowing 23.2 points per game, but they are pretty good against the run, allowing just 106 rushing yards per game. But while they are good against the run, they are one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. But this is another tough game to predict. As I said before, I definitely think this is a weird game, and I think Mason Rudolph beating the Bears, who are 7-3, definitely classifies as pretty weird. Well, I'm still going to take the Bears to get the win. Even though I do think this game is going to be very strange, I'm going to take the Bears to get the win. I think this game is close. The Bears, they've been great in close games, as they're 5-1 in one-score games this season. Plus, the Bears are also at home, so I've got them with the win by a score of 25-19. Up next, we have the Patriots at the Bengals. The Patriots, they're great. They're 9-2 and tied for the best record in the NFL, and the Bengals aren't the greatest, as they're just 3-7. But the Bengals, they might get Joe Burrow back for this week's game, because he had a full day of practice, and there is a chance he ends up playing. But Joe Burrow, his initial return date was Thanksgiving, so next week against the Ravens. But he did practice, so I guess there is a chance he could play this week. Although, I don't really think that makes a ton of sense for the Bengals to start Burrow this week, because then he'd be playing on a short week next week, playing on Thursday. And it also doesn't make a ton of sense because the Bengals are also without Jamar Chase, who's suspended for spitting on Jalen Ramsey. But while it does seem kind of unlikely for Joe Burrow to play, there definitely is a chance. But Joe, either Burrow or Flacco, will be leading the Bengals offense, and they've actually been okay, scoring 22.8 points per game, but obviously not having Jamar Chase is definitely going to hurt. Plus the Bengals offense, they also face a great Patriots defense that has allowed just 18.7 points per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for the Patriots, they've been great, as they're scoring 26.5 points per game, and Drake May leads the NFL with 2,836 passing yards. And the Patriots offense, they face a terrible Bengals defense that is worse than the NFL, allowing 33.4 points per game and 257 passing yards per game. But I'm going to take the Patriots to get the win here. They're the much better overall team. Even if Joe Burrow does end up returning for the Bengals, I don't think he's going to be able to do enough because he doesn't play defense too. And I'm going to take the Patriots to get the win by a score of 33-24. Up next, we have the Giants at the Lions. The Giants, they've not been playing too well, as they've lost 5 games in a row, and they're now 2-9. And the Lions, they're 6-4, although coming off a loss to the Eagles. In last week's loss to the Eagles, the Lions' offense was not good, as they scored a season-low 9 points. But the Lions offense has a big opportunity to get back on track this week because the Giants defense isn't very good, as they're tied for third worst in the NFL, allowing 27.3 points per it. Now, on the other side, the Giants offense, they've been okay, and they should have Jackson Dart back for this week's game after he was out last week with a concussion. And the Giants offense, they're scoring 23.5 points per game when Jackson Dart is their starting quarterback. But the Giants offense, they didn't match up against a Lions defense that looked really good last week, as they allowed just 16 against the Eagles, and the Lions are also top 5 in the NFL, allowing just 291 total yards per game. So I'm going to take the Lions to get the win here. They haven't lost back-to-back games since the 2022 season. I think they keep that streak alive. And speaking of streaks, the Giants are on an 11-game losing streak in road games. So I'm going to take the Lions to get the win here. I do think the Giants can keep this game close, but eventually the Lions' offense is way too good. They'll pull away. And I've got the Lions with the win by a score of 34-21. Up next, we got the Vikings at the Packers. The Packers, they're 6-3-1, and they snapped their 2-game losing streak last week with the win over the Giants. And then face a Vikings team that is not playing too well, as they're 4-6, and they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. And a big reason the Vikings have been so bad is JJ McCarthy, because the guy's just not very good. As since he's come back from injury, so his last 3 starts, he's completing just 50.5% of his passes for 180 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 5 receptions. And in those 3 games, the offense for the Vikings is only scoring 21 points per game. And I definitely think McCarthy and the Vikings offense will have another tough game this week, because they face the Packers defense that is playing pretty well, allowing just 19.6 points per game. Now, the Packers actually don't do a great job forcing turnovers, as they have just 8 of them on the season, and 4 of them being interceptions, but I definitely think the Packers defense does have a chance to pick up a few interceptions this season, or this week, because McCarthy definitely looks to throw the ball to the other team. Now, on the other side, the offense for the Packers, they're pretty good. They're scoring 24 points per game, while they might be without Josh Jacobs for this week's game, as he's battling a knee injury. The Packers offense, they face a Vikings defense that is decent, as they're allowing 23 points per game, but they're not very good at stopping the run. But I'm going to take the Packers to get the win here, even though they haven't been super impressive as of late. They're still the better overall team. Plus, I just don't trust the Vikings with how bad JJ McCarthy is. So I'm going to take the Packers to get the win by a score of 26-18. Up next, we got the Seahawks at the Titans. So this is quite the 2-week stretch for the Seahawks. They played arguably the best team in the NFL last week in the Rams, and they'll play one of the worst teams in the NFL, as the Titans they're 1-9. But this is a game that shouldn't be that close. The offense for the Seahawks was not very good last week with just 19 points, and Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions. But I think the Seahawks offense is going to have a big bounce back game this week, because the Titans defense is not good, allowing 27.3 points per game, and they don't force many turnovers. And then on the flip side, the Titans offense is worse than the NFL, putting up just 14 points per game, and the Seahawks defense is quite good. But I don't really think this game is that close. I don't have a ton to say about this game. I think the Seahawks dominate, get back on track, and win by a score of 34-14. Up next, we have the Colts at the Chiefs. This is a huge game. The Colts, they're 8-2, and they're one of the best teams in the NFL. And the Chiefs, they're 5-5, and coming off a loss to the Broncos. And this is a really big game for the Chiefs, because they might not even make the playoffs. Because if the playoffs start today, they wouldn't be in the playoffs, as they currently have the 9th seed in the AFC, and they're a game out of a playoff spot. And the Chiefs, they also need to win this game, because they don't have the easiest remaining schedule. Plus, they need to win more games than some other teams they're battling with for a wildcard spot, because a lot of teams they are competing with have that head-to-head tiebreaker over the Chiefs. Now, I don't think this is a must-win game for the Chiefs, but I definitely think it's close to one. And I definitely don't think they're in a good spot if they lose. But this game should be pretty good. On the offensive side of the ball for the Colts, they're leading the NFL as they're scoring 32.1 points per game, and their offense is very balanced as they're averaging over 250 passing yards per game and over 140 rushing yards per game. But while the Colts offense, they are great, they get a really tough matchup this week, as the Chiefs defense is also great, as they're allowing just 18 points per game, and they're one of just 5 defenses in the NFL that's allowing fewer than 200 passing yards per game and 100 or fewer rushing yards per game. Something else to watch is the Colts offensive line against the Chiefs pass rush. The Colts offensive line, they started the year playing really well, but in their last 3 games, they haven't been great, allowing 15 sacks. And the Chiefs pass rush is obviously pretty good. And another thing I'm interested to see is how Daniel Jones looks in a big game. Because obviously he's been playing pretty well to start the year, but I'm interested to see if he's going to continue to play well when the lights get bright, or if he's going to look like Sam Darnold does in a big game. But definitely going to be interesting to watch. And then on the flip side, the offense for the Chiefs, they're pretty good, as they're scoring 25.4 points per game, and Patrick Mahomes is 4th in the NFL in passing yards. But Mahomes, he didn't have his best game last week, and definitely put a part in why the Chiefs lost. And the Chiefs offense, they face a Colts defense that is playing pretty well, as they're allowing 20.6 points per game, but they have struggled against the pass at times this season. Well, this is a game that I definitely think can go either way, and this is a really tough game to predict. I do think this is going to be a close game, and the Chiefs have not been very good in one-score games this season, as they're 0-5. But I do think the Chiefs there will turn their season around at some point, and I think that could start this week with a big one over the Colts. But I really have no idea which way this game is going to go. I think the Chiefs treat this game as a must-win game and as a playoff game. We obviously know how they play in those. So I'll take the Chiefs with the win 26-23, but this game pretty much a coin flip. Next game, we got the Jets at the Ravens. So the Ravens, they've been playing well, as they're back with the 500 on the season, as they're now 5-5. And they face the Jets team that is not good, as they're 2-8. And the Jets, they're making a quarterback switch this week, as they're benching Justin Fields and starting Tyrod Taylor. And that definitely makes a lot of sense for the Jets, considering Justin Fields averages just 140 passing yards per game. But Tyrod Taylor will be making his second start of the season for the Jets, and he leads an offense that isn't great, scoring about 21 points per game. And the Jets offense, they also face a Ravens defense that has been playing a lot better as of late, as during their 4-game winning streak, they're allowing just 14 points per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for the Ravens, they're playing pretty well. They're scoring 25.2 points per game, although Lamar Jackson is banged up once again, as he's now dealing with an ankle injury, although it doesn't seem to be a serious one. But the Ravens offense, they face the Jets defense that is not good, allowing about 27 points per game. But I'm going to take the Ravens to get the win here. They've been playing well. I think that continues. I do think the Jets making quarterback switch could provide a little bit of a spark, but I don't think it's enough, and I've got the Ravens with the win 27-17. Up next, we got the Browns at the Raiders. This game is terrible, as the Browns are 2-8, and the Raiders are also 2-8. Well, at least this game has an interesting storyline, and that is obviously Shedeur Sanders making his first NFL start. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see how he looks, because he was awful last week when he came in replacing Dylan Gabriel, as he completed just 4 of his 16 passes for 47 yards and an interception. But maybe Shedeur can have a better game this week against a much easier defense. But I still don't really think he's that great. Now, the offense for the Raiders, they're also not great, as they're third worst in the NFL, as they're putting up just 15.5 points per game. And Geno Smith has also thrown more interceptions than touchdowns, as he has 12 touchdowns, 13 picks. And the Raiders offense, they don't face a Browns defense that will allow some points, but they're actually pretty solid, as they're second best in the NFL, allowing just 273 total yards per game. Well, this is a game that I really have no idea who to pick because of how bad both teams are. And usually in a game like this, I would go with the home team, in this case the Raiders. But I'm actually going to take the Browns. I really like what they have along the defensive line. The Raiders' offensive line is terrible. I think the Browns' defensive line dominates this game and leads them to the win. I don't really think we're going to see many points scored, so I do think the Browns' defense is the difference, and I've got the Browns with the win in a low-scoring game, 13-6. Up next, we got the Jaguars at the Cardinals. The Jaguars, they're currently 6-4, and they're coming off a blowout win over the Chargers, winning 35-6. But I still have no idea if the Jaguars are good or not, because every other week it seems like they play a great game, and then they're terrible. And we saw that in the last 2 weeks, because they blew a 26-point lead and lost to a Davis Mills-led Texans team, and then last week they destroyed a playoff team, the Chargers. So I really have no idea if the Jaguars are good or if they just pretend to be good. But the Jaguars, they face the Cardinals team that we know isn't very good, as the Cardinals are just 3-7, and they've also lost 7 of their last 8 games. But the Cardinals offense, they have actually been okay, as they're scoring 22.4 points per game, and we just saw Jacoby Brissett of all people set an NFL record for most completions in a game with 47. But Brissett and the Cardinals offense, they don't face a Jaguars defense that is actually pretty solid, as they're allowing 22.6 points per game, but they aren't the greatest against the pass, as they're allowing 236 passing yards per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Jaguars is pretty solid. They're scoring 24 points per game, and they really leaned on the run game, rushing for 127 yards per game. And I think the Jaguars offense will continue to play well, because this is the Cardinals defense that isn't very good, having allowed over 40 in back-to-back games. But I'm going to take the Jaguars to get the win here. I'm not too confident in the pick because of how inconsistent they are, but I just think they're the better overall team, and I've got them with the win, 27-21. Up next, we got the Eagles at the Cowboys. This is actually a pretty interesting game, as we've got the Cowboys who are 4-5-1 and coming off a pretty solid win against the Raiders, and they face an Eagles team that is 8-2, although they have not been playing too well. But this game is actually pretty good, and I think we got a great matchup. As the offense for the Cowboys, they're great. They're second best in the NFL, scoring 29.6 points per game, and they've got the league's best passing offense, averaging 258 passing yards per game. But the Cowboys offense, they face a great Eagle defense, as the Eagles, they're allowing just 20.1 points per game, but they've been on another level since the trade deadline and the addition of Jalen Phillips. As in their last 2 games, the Eagles, they've held both their opponents under 10 points, as they allowed just 9 against the Lions last week and 7 against the Packers the week before. And the Eagles' defense, they're also pretty solid against the pass, allowing 212 passing yards per game, which is roughly middle of the pack. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Eagles, they've not been very good. They're scoring 23.4 points per game on the season, but they can't run the ball and they can't throw the ball. And the Eagles offense, they have not been good recently, as they have 26 combined points over their last 2 games. But the Eagles offense, they match up against the Cowboy defense that is not good, as the Cowboys defense is second worst in the NFL, allowing 29.3 points per game, but the Cowboys defense did look pretty good last week against the Raiders. Now I know it's the Raiders and the offense isn't very good, but I do think the Cowboys defense did play pretty well. But I still don't want to overreact to just one game. But this is a game that I definitely think can go either way, and I think this game is going to be pretty good and a lot better than some people think. But the Cowboys, they definitely have a chance to get the win here, because their offense is great, and I definitely think they can score against an elite defense. And even though the Cowboys defense isn't good, I don't really think the Cowboys have a ton to worry about with how bad the Eagles offense has been. Plus the Cowboys, they've also been really good at home against the Eagles, winning 6 of the last 7 games. But I'm still going to take the Eagles to get the win here, because even though the Eagles have looked terrible, I still think they're going to win. They've found ways to win all year long, even though they've looked terrible doing it. I think that happens once again, and I've got the Eagles with the win 21-20. Up next, we got the Falcons at the Saints. The Saints, they're not good as they're just 2-8, but the Falcons, they're also not much better, as they're 3-7, and they've lost 5 games in a row. And the Falcons, they're going to be starting Kirk Cousins at quarterback as Michael Penix Jr. is out for the year with a partially torn ACL. So this is really a game between two teams that are not very good. But the offense for the Saints, they're starting Tyler Shuck at quarterback once again, and he leads the Saints offense that is just pretty bad, as they're scoring 15.5 points per game. But the Saints offense, they face the Falcons defense that also isn't amazing, allowing 24 points per game. And then on the flip side, the Falcons offense is not very good, scoring 19.5 points per game. Plus they're now starting Kirk Cousins, who in his one start this season already, threw for just 173 yards, and the offense put up 10 points. But the Falcons, they should still be able to run the football, because Bijan Robinson is 6th in the NFL, averaging 78 rushing yards per game. And I definitely think Bijan can have a big game this week, because the Saints defense is allowing 25 points per game, and they're also not good against the run. But this again, I don't think it's going to be that good, but I'm going to take the Falcons to get the win. I think they're the better overall team, I think their defense is better, and I think they run the football effectively. I think that's the difference, and I've got the Falcons to win 21-17, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Saints get the win. Up next, we got the Buccaneers at the Rams on Sunday Football. And we'll have a live watch party for this game starting about 8:15 Eastern Time on Sunday, so I hope to see you guys there. But the Rams, they're 8-2 and coming off a big win over the Seahawks, and I think they're the best team in the NFL. And then we'll face a Buccaneers team that's also pretty good, as they're 6-4, although they haven't been playing too well as of late, as they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. But I still think this game could be pretty good. The offense for the Buccaneers is still putting up points, as they're scoring 25.2 points per game, and they just dropped over 30 last week against the Bills. But the Buccaneers offense, they gave a very tough test this week against an elite Rams defense that is the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL, allowing just 17.2 points per game. And then on the offensive side for the Rams, they're also great, as they're scoring over 27 points per game, and their pass game has been unstoppable with 246 passing yards per game. And they don't face a Buccaneers defense that's not the greatest, as they're allowing 25 points per game, and they're pretty bad against the pass. But I'm going to take the Rams to get the win here. For the better overall team, they're trending up, the Buccaneers are trending down. I think Matthew Stafford's another big game, and I've got the Rams with the win by a score of 31-22. And our final game, we've got the Panthers at the 49ers on Monday Night Football. And we will also have a live watch party for this game, and that will start about 8:15 Eastern Time on Monday, so I'm going to hope to see you guys there. But this is a pretty interesting game. The 49ers are 7-4, and coming off a dominant win over the Cardinals, and the Panthers, they're pretty up and down, but they beat the Falcons last week, and they're now 6-5 on the season. And in last week's win for the Panthers, Bryce Young was great, as he threw for a Panthers franchise record of 448 yards and 3 touchdowns. And if Bryce Young is going to play like that every week, that makes the offense really hard to defend, because you also can't forget about Rico Dowdle and his run game. But the Panthers offense, they face a 49er defense that is pretty good, as they're allowing 22.9 points per game, and they're great against the run, although their pass defense isn't very good, as they're 5th worst in the NFL. And on the other side, the offense for the 49ers is pretty good, putting up 23.7 points per game. And Brock Purdy made his return from injury last week, and he played pretty well, throwing for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the 49ers offense, they face a Panther defense that's pretty solid, allowing 22.6 points per game. And they're also pretty good against the run and the pass. But this is another game that I definitely think can go either way, and another game that I think is going to be closer than some people think. But I'm going to take the 49ers to get the win. I think they're the better overall team, and even though their pass defense isn't amazing, I still don't completely trust Bryce Young to have 2 great games in a row. So I'm going to take the 49ers to get the win by a score of 25-23, but another game that can definitely go either way. Well, those are my Week 12 NFL predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best but as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think would sometimes big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best as often as possible, and I'll see you in the next video.